I came home to find 100 strangers cannonballing into my pool like it was a theme park. Beer cans floated lazily in the water, greasy fingerprints smeared my glass patio door, and someone had dragged a full-sized grill onto my deck, flipping ribs like this was their backyard. A group of moms lounged under my umbrella, sipping wine as if they owned the place. Kids screamed, splashed, and ran around barefoot on my expensive tile. Then, as if the universe wanted to see if I could take any more, the HOA president, Victoria Kensington, stood at the edge of my pool, megaphone in hand, announcing to the crowd, "Welcome to your new community pool." For a moment, I thought I had suffered a heatstroke-induced hallucination. My brain struggled to comprehend what I was looking at. It had to be a prank, right? Then I noticed my locked side gate wide open, its hinges twisted. A laminated sign taped to my back fence read, "Community Pool, Open Access by HOA Mandate." I clenched my jaw so hard my molars might have cracked. My feet carried me forward before my brain fully processed what I was about to do. I stepped over a half-eaten burger someone had abandoned on the ground and walked right up to Victoria, who hadn't even noticed me yet. "Oh, what a turnout!" She beamed at a man next to her, handing him a paper cup of lemonade. "This will really boost property values." "What the hell is this?" I cut in, my voice dangerously low. Victoria turned, blinking in mock surprise, as if I was some random party guest and not the owner of the property she had just invaded. "Oh, Michael, so glad you could join us. The HOA board voted to classify your pool as a community amenity based on a bylaw from 1986, she smiled, utterly unfazed. "We sent a letter, but I assume it got lost in the mail." I could feel the veins in my neck pulsing. "You didn't send a letter?" "Well, it was in the monthly newsletter, page 4 in the bottom corner," she said with a casual wave of her hand. "We're all so excited to have this new gathering place. Just think of the community bonding." I looked around at the scene of absolute destruction. Someone had dragged my expensive lounge chair into the pool. A toddler who clearly had no regard for bathroom etiquette was standing suspiciously still in the shallow end. My outdoor speaker system blared pop music at full volume. My jaw tightened. "Victoria, you had no right to do this," I said, voice level, but there was an edge to it now. "This is private property, my pool, my home." Victoria's smile didn't waver. If anything, it grew smugger. "Oh, Michael, when you bought this house, you agreed to the HOA's authority. You should have read the fine print." Behind Victoria, I noticed a woman I'd seen around the neighborhood but never spoken with. She was watching our exchange with unusual intensity, her dark eyes narrowed, taking everything in. Unlike the other residents who were obliviously enjoying themselves, she seemed to be studying Victoria with a calculated gaze. Oh, I had read the fine print. I had read it very carefully because, unlike Victoria, who enjoyed bullying her way through neighborhood decisions, I had an ace up my sleeve that she had no idea about. The problem was, I had come home expecting a quiet evening, not an act of war. I needed to get my bearings before I launched a counterattack. I exhaled slowly, then, without another word, walked straight to my patio control panel. Victoria barely registered what I was doing as she turned back to schmooze with another homeowner. I pressed a button. Instantly, the pool's filtration system shut down. Within seconds, the water turned from crystal clear to a murky green. The partygoers noticed immediately. People wrinkled their noses. Some started climbing out, looking disgusted. One guy lifted his arms out of the water, staring in horror as his skin had taken on a slightly slimy texture. "What's happening?" someone yelped. I leaned casually against the fence, arms crossed. "Oh, that's just what happens when an unsanctioned high bacteria level event occurs in a privately maintained water source." A woman shrieked and scrambled out of the pool, slipping on a wet Dorito someone had crushed into the pavement. A few guys immediately grabbed their towels and hustled toward the exit, muttering about infections. Even Victoria's confident demeanor wavered as she watched her perfect HOA-sponsored event fall apart in real time. I didn't wait for her to recover. I turned to her, speaking just loud enough for the remaining crowd to hear. "You said I should have read the fine print. Funny, because I did." I smiled, the kind of smile that made people nervous. "See, I'm the state water commissioner." The murmur that rippled through the party was delicious. Some people turned to each other in alarm. Others stared at me, realization dawning on their faces. Victoria tried to brush it off, laughing nervously. "Oh, well, You illegally altered private property designation without state approval," I continued, my voice calm but firm. "Not only that, but you knowingly exposed 100 people to untested, non-regulated water. I have half a mind to report this to the health department right now." Victoria's face drained of color. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "You have no idea what you just started." Then, without waiting for her to respond, I walked inside and locked my doors, leaving her standing there, stunned, speechless, and for the first time, very, very worried. The mysterious woman who had been watching followed me to my door, catching it just before I could close it. "I need 5 minutes of your time," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I know things about Victoria you're going to want to hear." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. "Who are you?" "Sofia Alvarez," she said, extending her hand. "Former real estate attorney, current victim of Victoria's reign of terror, and possibly your best ally in this fight." I shook her hand cautiously. "What makes you think I'm fighting?" Sofia's smile was sharp. "Because I just watched you turn your pool into a swamp rather than let her win. Anyone who does that isn't planning to roll over." She had a point. "Victoria's done this before," Sofia continued, glancing around my living room. "Not the pool specifically, but the land grab. She did it to the Rodriguez family last year, claimed their extra lot was needed for a community garden. By the time they figured out how to fight back, it was too late. They moved rather than deal with her." "Why are you telling me this?" Sofia's eyes met mine. "Because Victoria Kensington ruined my career. I represented the Rodriguez family. When they lost, my reputation in this town took a hit. I've been waiting for someone with the right credentials to stand up to her." I studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. "And what do you get out of helping me?" "Justice," she said simply, "and maybe a little schadenfreude." Victoria's arrogance had been her greatest weapon in the HOA, but now, for the first time, I had seen it flicker. That brief moment of doubt, the realization that she had crossed the wrong person, was exactly what I needed. I spent the next morning at my desk, sipping coffee and meticulously drafting a complaint. Not an angry email, not a strongly worded letter, but an official state filing. The kind that came with a case number, an investigation, and the kind of bureaucratic nightmare Victoria wouldn't be able to ignore. The HOA had classified my pool as a community amenity without state approval, which, considering I was the one in charge of overseeing water regulations, meant I could weaponize an entire system against her without breaking a sweat. An hour later, I had forwarded the complaint to the Department of Public Health, the state environmental agency, and, for good measure, the tax office, just in case she had misallocated HOA funds. Then I leaned back in my chair and waited. My phone rang. It was Sofia. "She's already making moves," she said without preamble. "Victoria just called an emergency board meeting for noon, but that's not all. She's friends with State Senator Williams." My stomach tightened. Senator Williams headed the committee that oversaw my department's budget. "How close are they?" "College roommates, weekly tennis partners." Sofia paused. "And I've heard rumors of some financial entanglements, investments they share." This complicated things. Victoria wasn't just an HOA tyrant. She had political connections that could threaten my job, but backing down now wasn't an option. "There's something else you should know," Sofia added. "Victoria's been pushing for a real community pool for years. The city council shot her down 3 times because of budget concerns. This might be personal for her, a way to prove she can deliver what she promised." "By stealing my pool," I scoffed. "By any means necessary. That's how Victoria operates." Sofia hesitated. "Be careful, Michael. She's not someone who accepts defeat gracefully." I didn't have to wait long for Victoria's response. By noon, an emergency HOA meeting had been scheduled. I made sure to be there early. The meeting was held in the neighborhood clubhouse, a painfully beige building that smelled like cheap air fresheners and resentment. Victoria sat at the front, her usual smug confidence on display, but I could see the tightness in her jaw. The board members sat beside her, mostly nodding along as she explained that a certain resident was attempting to create unnecessary conflict. When I walked in, conversations stopped. Homeowners exchanged glances, some curious, others annoyed, but a few I noticed were starting to look at Victoria with suspicion. That was good. That meant I wasn't the only one who saw through her act. I took a seat near the back and listened as she launched into a speech about neighborhood harmony and working together for the good of the community. She was trying to downplay everything, pretending this was just a minor disagreement instead of an absolute disaster of her own making. I let her talk, I let her feel in control, and then, right when she was at the height of her performance, I stood up. Victoria hesitated, annoyed by the interruption but clearly knowing she couldn't ignore me. "Michael," she said, forcing a smile, "do you have something to add?" I nodded, pulling out a folder. "Actually, I do. Since you made my private property a public pool, I took the liberty of sending some paperwork to the relevant agencies." I flipped open a document and held it up. Starting today, my pool is officially declared a hazardous site due to unregulated public use, which means it is legally closed until further notice. The room erupted, homeowners turned to each other in confusion, and a few immediately started complaining about how they had already promised their kids another weekend at the pool. Victoria's smile flickered just for a second before she forced it back into place. "This is ridiculous," she said, laughing slightly. "You don't have the authority to do that." I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Victoria, what's my job again?" She faltered. I let the silence stretch, watching as the realization settled into the room. Then, before she could recover, I flipped to another page. "Oh, and since the HOA classified my pool as a community asset, I also sent the property reclassification to the county assessor's office. Since it's now considered public property, that means the HOA is now financially responsible for all maintenance, repairs, and liability insurance." Victoria's face drained of color. Someone in the crowd gasped. A man in the front row turned to his wife and whispered something urgently. That was when the first wave of panic hit. "What does that mean for our HOA fees?" a woman called out. I shrugged. "Well, considering the cost of maintaining a public pool is pretty steep, I'd imagine your HOA dues are about to go way up." The grumbling turned into outright chaos. People started shouting, some demanding answers, others turning directly to Victoria, who was still struggling to compose herself. From the corner of the room, Sophia caught my eye and gave a subtle nod of approval. But there was something else in her expression, a calculating intensity that made me wonder, just for a moment, if she had her own agenda beyond helping me take down Victoria. I watched as Victoria gritted her teeth, then forced another smile. "This is just a misunderstanding," she said, her voice a little higher pitched than before. "We will handle it internally." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, good, because there's one more thing. Since the pool was used for a public event without proper permits, the Department of Public Health is launching an investigation into HOA practices. That means health inspectors will be visiting not just my property, but all common areas under HOA management." The explosion of outrage was immediate. Victoria's carefully constructed authority shattered in an instant. Homeowners who had blindly followed her leadership were now realizing they had been dragged into something far bigger than they had signed up for. People turned on each other, accusations flying, and I just stood there, watching, arms crossed, enjoying the show. Victoria tried to regain control, but she was losing fast. Someone in the back shouted that they wanted to see the HOA's financial records. Another person demanded a refund for the increased fees. The board members started whispering amongst themselves, looking uncomfortable. Victoria, desperate, slammed her hand on the table. "Enough," she snapped. "This meeting is adjourned. We will resolve this privately." I laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, Victoria, nothing about this is private anymore." I turned toward the crowd. "I'd recommend checking your HOA agreements carefully. You might be surprised what else you've been paying for." With that, I walked out, leaving Victoria to deal with the mess she had made. As I pushed through the clubhouse doors, Sophia fell into step beside me. "That was quite a performance," she said, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "But you should know, Victoria isn't going down without a fight. She's already reaching out to Senator Williams." "Let her," I replied, though I felt a flutter of unease. Sophia studied me. "You don't seem worried about your job." "Should I be?" She shrugged. "I'm just saying, Victoria's not above playing dirty, and not everyone in there is on your side." She nodded toward the clubhouse. "Some families genuinely needed a community pool. The public one is overcrowded and filthy, and the country club is too expensive for most folks here." "So they stole mine," I shot back. "There are proper channels for this kind of thing." "Of course," Sophia agreed quickly. "I'm on your side, remember. I'm just preparing you for the PR battle ahead." By the time I reached my house, I already had 2 emails from state offices confirming the investigations were underway. I poured myself a drink, stepped onto my deck, and looked at my now empty, murky pool. It was only a matter of time before Victoria realized she had made the biggest mistake of her life, and I was going to enjoy every second of watching her empire crumble. My phone chimed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Check your work email, S." I pulled up my email on my phone and felt my blood run cold. There in my inbox was an official notice from the Department of Administrative Services, Notice of Administrative Leave Pending Investigation. Apparently, someone had filed a complaint alleging I was using my position at the Water Commission for personal gain, specifically to harass a neighborhood HOA. The complaint included screenshots of text messages I had supposedly sent, bragging about how I was going to destroy Victoria Kensington using my government authority. Messages I had never sent. I immediately called Sophia, who answered on the first ring. "She's faster than I expected," Sophia said before I could speak. "She must have had this contingency plan ready to go." "These are fake," I said, scrolling through the attached screenshots. "I never sent these." "Of course they're fake, but it doesn't matter. The investigation will take weeks, maybe months in the meantime." "I'm suspended," I finished grimly. "Without pay, I'm guessing." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "What the hell am I supposed to do now?" "Now," Sophia's voice took on a determined edge. "Now we fight back harder. Meet me at Riverfront Coffee in an hour. I have some ideas." The fallout came faster than I expected. By the next morning, my inbox was flooded with messages from neighbors, some apologizing, others furious, not at me but at Victoria. The HOA board had gone into full crisis mode, trying to spin the situation, but the damage was already done. The county assessor's office was reviewing the sudden reclassification of my pool. The health department had scheduled an inspection for the HOA's common areas, and state auditors had been made aware of financial irregularities. It was a perfect storm of bureaucratic nightmares, and Victoria was at the center of it. But so was I, suspended from my job and potentially facing a professional ethics investigation. I had barely finished my first cup of coffee when I saw Victoria herself marching up my driveway, her heels clicking furiously against the pavement. She didn't bother knocking. Instead, she stood at the threshold of my front porch, arms crossed, glaring at me like I had personally set her house on fire. "We need to talk," she said through gritted teeth. I took a slow sip of my coffee before answering. "Do we?" Victoria inhaled sharply, clearly trying to keep her temper in check. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this has to stop. Now." I leaned against the doorframe, tilting my head slightly. "You mean enforcing the law, holding the HOA accountable? That's my job, Victoria." Her jaw clenched. "You know damn well this isn't about regulations. This is about you trying to make a point." I smiled. "Oh, I think the point's been made, loud and clear." Victoria's frustration bubbled over, her face turning red. "You have no idea what kind of mess you've made. People are panicking, the board is in chaos, home values are at risk." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean your control over them is slipping?" She scoffed, shaking her head in disbelief. "You really think you've won, don't you? You think you can just pull a few strings, make a few calls, and get rid of me?" I took another sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch between us. Then I shrugged. "Yeah." For the first time since I had met her, Victoria looked genuinely rattled. She had built her power in this neighborhood on intimidation and manipulation, and for years no one had dared challenge her. But she had made the mistake of assuming I was just another homeowner she could push around. She had underestimated me, and now she was realizing that there was nothing she could do to stop what was coming. "This suspension is just the beginning," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "By the time I'm done with you, you'll be lucky to get a job checking chlorine levels at the YMCA." Before I could respond, another voice cut in. "Is that a threat, Mrs. Kensington?" Sophia asked, appearing at the bottom of my driveway with her phone held up, clearly recording. "Because it sounds an awful lot like you're threatening a state official." Victoria whirled around. "You," she hissed. "I should have known you'd be involved in this." "Recording in public is perfectly legal in this state," Sophia replied calmly, "and threats against government employees can be considered a criminal offense." "He's suspended," Victoria snapped. "Still a government employee," Sophia countered, "and more importantly, still a private citizen whose property rights you've violated." The sound of a car pulling up distracted us all. We turned just in time to see two men in suits stepping out of a black sedan. One of them carried a clipboard, the other had a badge clipped to his belt. Victoria paled. "State auditors," I said casually, nodding toward them. "Right on time." Victoria's hands clenched into fists. She looked at me one last time, her eyes full of unfiltered rage, then turned on her heel and stormed back down the driveway without another word. I watched as the auditors approached her, introducing themselves with firm handshakes and professional smiles. Victoria barely managed a polite nod before they started questioning her about the HOA's financial records. I closed the door, a satisfied smirk playing on my lips. It wasn't over yet, but the walls were closing in around her, and she knew it. Sophia lowered her phone. "That was perfect timing." "Almost too perfect," I said, giving her a questioning look. "How did you know to be here with your camera ready?" She smiled enigmatically. "I've been watching Victoria's patterns for months. She always confronts people before her morning tennis match, like clockwork." Something about her answer didn't quite add up, but before I could press further, my phone rang. It was my department head calling to inform me that Senator Williams was personally requesting an expedited review of my case. That's unusual, I said carefully. Very, my boss agreed, almost like someone's pulling strings to either clear you quickly or bury you faster. Any idea who you've pissed off, Harrison? I might have an idea, I admitted. After hanging up, I turned to Sophia. Victoria's going straight to the top. This just became political. Sophia didn't seem surprised. We need to move faster then. I've been doing some digging into the HOA's finances. You're not going to believe what I found. She pulled out a thumb drive from her purse. Victoria's been embezzling funds for years, but here's the kicker. She's been using the money to secure land for an actual community pool. She's accumulated almost enough to break ground on the vacant lot behind Maple Street. I frowned. Why not just increase HOA fees legitimately or take out a loan? Because 3 years ago she promised the neighborhood a pool without raising fees. It was how she got elected HOA president. She's too proud to admit she couldn't deliver. Sophia hesitated. There's something else. The pool fund isn't the only place money's been disappearing. About $50,000 has been transferred to an offshore account in the last year alone. How did you get access to all this? I asked, suddenly suspicious. Sophia's expression didn't change. I told you I was a real estate attorney. I know how to follow paper trails. Before I could question her further, my phone pinged with a news alert. The local paper had just published a story, state official accused of abusing position in neighborhood dispute. The article quoted an anonymous HOA board member describing how I had weaponized state agencies for personal revenge after the community tried to democratically implement shared amenities. This is unbelievable, I muttered, scrolling through the biased reporting. Actually, it's predictable, Sophia replied. Victoria knows how to spin a narrative. Here's what will surprise you, though. She tapped something on her phone, then handed it to me. Read this. It was an email thread between Victoria and several HOA board members from 6 months ago, discussing the possibility of using eminent domain to seize my property, not just the pool, but my entire house, for community development purposes. They can't do that, I said immediately. They can try, Sophia countered, especially with friends in high places. Victoria was building her case long before you moved in. Your house is strategically located adjacent to the park, perfect for expanding community facilities. You were targeted, Michael. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was bigger than I had imagined. How did you get these emails? Sophia looked away. Let's just say Victoria isn't the only one with connections. Over the next few days, things unraveled even faster than I had anticipated. The health department's inspection uncovered multiple violations in the HOA's common areas, including unsafe playground equipment, improperly maintained walkways, and a clubhouse bathroom that, according to the inspector, should have been condemned years ago. Residents were outraged, realizing that the fees they had been paying for maintenance had apparently not been used for maintenance at all. The financial audit was even worse. It turned out Victoria had been pocketing thousands in unauthorized administrative fees, overcharging residents for services that were either never performed or dramatically inflated in cost. The more the auditors dug, the more they found, and within a week, Victoria's once loyal supporters had turned against her completely. Meanwhile, my own situation had grown more complicated. The investigation into my alleged misconduct was proceeding at an unusually rapid pace, clearly expedited by Senator Williams, and public opinion in the neighborhood was divided. Some residents saw me as a hero standing up to corruption, while others believed I was selfishly depriving families of a needed community resource. Matters came to a head during a neighborhood-wide meeting called to address recent developments. The community center was packed, with residents spilling out the door. Victoria sat at the front table, flanked by the remaining loyal board members, though their numbers had dwindled significantly. I arrived with Sophia, who had become my unofficial strategist in this neighborhood war. We took seats near the back, watching as Victoria tried to maintain control of the increasingly hostile crowd. We understand there are concerns, Victoria was saying, her voice strained but still projecting confidence. But I assure you, every decision made by this board has been in the best interest of our community. What about the money? Someone shouted from the middle of the room. Where did our maintenance fees go? Victoria smiled tightly. The audit is still ongoing, but I'm confident any discrepancies will be explained by simple accounting errors. $20,000 isn't a simple error, another resident called out. Victoria's smile didn't waver. As I said, we'll address any concerns once the audit is complete. In the meantime, I think we need to focus on the real issue at hand, Mr. Harrison's vindictive campaign against our community's attempt to provide a swimming facility for our children. All eyes turned to me. I stood up, ready to defend myself, when the doors at the back of the room burst open. A man in a suit walked in, flanked by 2 police officers. "Victoria Kensington," he called out. Victoria's composure slipped for the first time. "Yes, who are you?" "Agent Daniels, FBI," the man said, holding up a badge. "We need to speak with you regarding some financial irregularities tied to your accounts." The room went dead silent, Victoria's face drained of color. "This is absurd," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Whatever you need to discuss can be handled privately after this meeting." Agent Daniels shook his head. "I'm afraid this can't wait. We have a warrant for financial records related to both the HOA and your personal accounts." One of the officers stepped forward, holding up an official document. "We're also here to execute a search warrant for the HOA offices and your residence." Chaos erupted as residents realized they were witnessing their HOA president being investigated by federal agents. Questions flew from all directions. People stood up, phones out, recording the scene. Victoria, desperate to maintain control, raised her voice above the din. "This is all a misunderstanding, and it's directly related to Michael Harrison's vendetta against me. He's manipulated the system, called in favors, all because he doesn't want to share his pool." I remained seated, aware that all eyes were now shifting between Victoria and me. That's when Sophia stood up. "Actually," she said, her voice cutting through the noise, "I'm the one who contacted the FBI." Victoria's head snapped toward her. "You?" Sophia nodded, then addressed the room. "My name is Sophia Alvarez. What most of you don't know is that I'm not just a resident. I'm an undercover investigator with the State Financial Crimes Task Force. We've been tracking Victoria Kensington for over a year, long before Michael Harrison moved to the neighborhood." My jaw dropped. Sophia, or whoever she really was, turned to me with an apologetic smile before continuing. "Victoria Kensington isn't just embezzling HOA funds. She's part of a larger real estate fraud scheme operating across 3 counties. They target affluent neighborhoods, infiltrate HOAs, manipulate property values, and force out homeowners who resist, allowing their partners to buy properties at depressed prices." The FBI agent nodded confirmation. "Ms. Alvarez has been providing valuable intelligence for our joint task force." Victoria looked like she might faint. "This is a witch hunt. I've done nothing but serve this community." "We have the offshore accounts, Victoria," Sophia said quietly. "We have the communications with your partners. We have everything." As if to emphasize her point, one of the officers approached Victoria with handcuffs. "Victoria Kensington, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy," he said formally. The meeting exploded into absolute bedlam. People were shouting, filming, some even applauding as Victoria was led away in handcuffs, still protesting her innocence. I sat stunned, trying to process what had just happened. Sophia, or whatever her real name was, took the seat beside me. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth," she said quietly. "We needed your genuine reactions. You weren't just a victim of HOA overreach, you were unknowingly helping us build our case. So all of this, my pool, the invasion, it was part of your investigation." She shook her head. "No, that was pure Victoria. She really did think she could just take your pool. Your reaction and your position at the Water Commission just gave us the perfect opportunity to accelerate our timeline." I wasn't sure whether to be angry at being used or relieved that this nightmare was ending. What about my job, the suspension? "Already taken care of. Senator Williams has been informed of the situation. Your suspension will be lifted by morning with a formal apology." She hesitated. "For what it's worth, I think you handled all this remarkably well." At the next emergency meeting, Victoria was officially removed from the HOA board. The members voted to hire an independent management company to oversee operations while the full extent of the financial damage was assessed. The investigation uncovered that Victoria had been siphoning money not just for the promised community pool fund, which did exist, though significantly underfunded, but also to an investment scheme that had defrauded homeowners across the state. The HOA was in shambles, and for the first time, the residents realized they had a choice. They could either elect new leadership and try to salvage what was left of the organization, or they could dissolve it entirely. I already knew what I wanted. I had no interest in replacing Victoria. The problem wasn't just her, it was the entire system that gave people like her power in the first place. And so I did what I should have done from the very beginning. I filed a petition to dissolve the HOA altogether. First, some residents resisted the idea. They had been conditioned to believe that an HOA was necessary, that without it the neighborhood would fall apart. But as the truth about Victoria's corruption spread, more and more people began to see things differently. They realized that the HOA had done nothing but make their lives more complicated, that the promises of increased property values were just a smokescreen for unnecessary rules and fees. The vote was held 2 weeks later. It wasn't even close. The HOA was officially disbanded, and for the first time in decades, homeowners were free from its control. Victoria, unsurprisingly, did not take the news well. She tried to fight it, threatening legal action, but without the backing of the board, she had no real power left. And when the final audit results came in, revealing even more financial misconduct, she had bigger problems to deal with. She was facing heavy fines, potential criminal charges, and worst of all, complete and utter humiliation. Her house went up for sale a month later. Rumor had it she was moving to another state, trying to start over somewhere new. I didn't care enough to find out the details. I was too busy enjoying my newfound peace. With the HOA gone, I finally got to use my pool again. No random parties, no entitled neighbors treating my backyard like a public park. Just me, a cold drink, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. But there was still one loose end, the community that genuinely needed a pool. Despite everything, I couldn't ignore that many families in the neighborhood had been excited about having a place for their kids to swim. So I made a decision. I reached out to the newly formed Neighborhood Association, a voluntary, no-fee organization that had replaced the HOA, and offered to host supervised community swim days twice a month during the summer. Not because I had to, but because sometimes being a good neighbor means sharing what you have on your own terms. A few weeks after everything settled down, my phone rang. It was Agent Daniels from the FBI. "Just thought you'd want to know," he said. "Victoria Kensington accepted a plea deal. She'll be serving 18 months and paying substantial restitution." "What about the others in her scheme?" I asked. "We're working through that now. Sophia, or Agent Alvarez, I should say, has been invaluable. She's moved on to another operation, by the way, asked me to tell you goodbye." I felt a twinge of disappointment. Despite the deception, I had grown to respect Sophia's determination and intellect. "One more thing," Agent Daniels added. "We found evidence that Victoria was planning to have your job permanently terminated. She and Senator Williams had quite the arrangement going. You might have lost more than just your pool if this had played out differently." I thanked him for the information and hung up, feeling a strange mix of vindication and disquiet. The stakes had been higher than I'd realized. That evening, as I floated in my pool, my private, peaceful pool, I reflected on the bizarre chain of events that had unfolded. What had started as a simple boundary violation had exposed corruption at multiple levels, from the HOA to state politics. All because Victoria Kensington couldn't accept that some things weren't hers to take. My phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. "Pool looks better without 100 strangers in it. Well played, S." I smiled and typed back, "Next time you're running an undercover operation in my neighborhood, give me a heads up." The reply came quickly, "Where's the fun in that?" As I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the clear blue sky, I realized something. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning. It's making sure the people who tried to screw you over know, without a doubt, that they never stood a chance. And sometimes the most valuable asset in any battle isn't your position or your power. It's knowing when to stand your ground, even if you have to stand alone.